pensavo che i tamponi fossero come cotton fioc, infatti ci sono anche quelli che sono delle fibre tutte avvoltolate attorno a uno stelo e sono molto morbide. Invece ci sono dei tamponi che assomigliano a degli scovolini e hanno delle fibre che partono dal centro dello stelo e si dipartono verso l'esterno, e quando vengono messi nel naso o nella gola grattano la superficie della mucosa, e alcune volte la fanno sanguinare, perché magari l'operatore non è un otorinolaringoiatra, quindi non sa bene come agire e che pressione fare, e quindi può essere dannosa. E queste fibre sono vetrose, sono rigide, in qualche caso ci sono di silicio zirconio, cosa che uno non si aspetta, perché non è un elemento che uno usa tutti i santi giorni, insomma, quindi è qualcosa di tecnologicamente avanzato che onestamente per un tampone io non avrei utilizzato. Il problema fondamentale però è che queste fibre, essendo così vetrose, rigide, si spezzano, e quindi i detriti di queste fibre rimangono all'interno della lesione addirittura, e quindi intanto tamponi ripetuti possono causare la non cicatrizzazione della lesione, possono dare delle granulomatosi, delle fibrosi, quindi sono tra l'altro dei materiali che non è che sono stati testati per la biocompatibilità, quindi non si capisce, io non capisco, io come esperto di materiali non capisco appunto questo uso di queste fibre così rigide, perché scavare tanto tessuto quando se c'è un virus, quello sta in superficie, sta anche nella saliva. Si usano dei tamponi per adulti e vai a lavorare in un'anatomia e morfologia completamente diverse, già questo è un problema. In più, come dicevo, ci sono queste fibre così rigide che possono essere veramente lesive per la mucosa di un bambino, e quindi anche questa è una cosa che onestamente io non capisco. L'uso di nanoparticelle di argento, perché usano cioè anche questo è qualcosa che mi trova un po' a disagio, anche perché questi possono essere degli interferenti dentro una PCR, quindi possono dare dei risultati particolari, forse positivi, quando invece non lo sono.
Could you tell me what this is?
You see a very normal swab, and it is made of cotton fibers, but for this COVID-19 pandemic, we used sophisticated swabs also. So it is normal, but you see that in some cases there are dirty things here. Things that are made of iron, chromium, nickel, aluminum, so a sort of stainless steel, metallic nanoparticles.
Now, is that normal for a swab like this?
No, usually you must have only the cotton fibers without the dirty things inside. No, this dust probably comes from the industrial process. But a dirty industrial process, usually you must construct these things in a white chamber, in a white room, sterile and without particles, without dust, without anything. So that is the composition of this dust. In this case, you see another a new type of swab, and the superficial morphology is this, and it looks like a porcupine. Porcupine. But you see that only touching the swab, some fibers are broken. And during the swapping, probably some swap fibers remain inside, and they can induce a reaction, a biological reaction. Within the fibers of the swap, we found also other black fibers. They came from the industrial process, a dirty industrial process. We don't know the origin of these fibers. Sometimes they are black, sometimes red or blue.
Do you know what they're made of?
Yes, we don't know. But the fibers are made of silicon zirconium. A small quantity of titanium, sulfur, aluminum, sodium, and carbon and oxygen. So probably the core is plastic fiber, probably nylon, but they are coated with silicon zirconium in order to harden the fiber. So they can scratch the internal mucosa, the nasal and oropharyngeal mucosa, and they detach part of the tissue. So they collect not only possible viruses, but also the tissue, and part of the fiber can remain there and induce a biological reaction. It is a fiber, and you see that the coating of silicon zirconium. Another type.
Are these unusual materials to find in a?
It is a high technological material. Zirconium, titanium, silicon, it is a high technology material. So we don't understand why they use a high technology for a poor medical device that is used only for 1 minute at the time of swapping. So
PCR testing.
For the PCR testing, yes.
So does that imply maybe some other technological purpose?
I don't know, but I know that they made this coating in order to have the fiber harder, in order to scratch better the surface, the internal mucosa and so on.
And where did the swab come from?
These are from China, of course. The name of this swab is Biocoma A swab, and you see that the morphology, the external morphology is different. And it seems that these fibers are entrapped in some organic material. We don't know why, but we verified that also in this case there are dirty things entrapped, black filaments, and these are glassy fibers made of silicon, aluminum, titanium, but they contain also dust made of calcium, sulfur, potassium. Of course, we don't know the industrial process to develop this medical device, but we can recognize that they are made not in a clean room, but in a room, in a laboratory with dust. So it is another type of swab, and the name is FLQ swab. And it is strange because in the lower part there are silver nanoparticles deposited. And we don't know the meaning, the aim of this coating that it costs, of course.
Silver nanoparticles.
Nanoparticles. You see very well the nanoparticles of silver. The fibers are made also in this case of zirconia, silicon, sulfur, and also in this case sulfur, it is a strange element for this material. Probably it is a coating. We see the morphology of the fiber, but if the fibers are embedded in a organic compound, we cannot understand, verify well the material. If you are present during the construction, the synthesis of the medical device, probably we can give a meaning of what we see. A meaning of this chemical spectrum. I suppose that sulfur is a contaminant of the fiber, probably due to organic compound deposited on the fibers. We see very well the coating of silicon zirconium on the fiber. Fibers can scratch the internal mucosa and inducing bleeding. The lesion need time to repair, but if you make another swabbing after a few days, probably you have that the lesion have no time to repair, and you have bleeding again. Not only, but the pressure that the operator can make during the swapping and the torsion he make probably can induce the break of some fibers that can remain there. So in that case, you create a lesion. But in the lesion there are a foreign body. Probably you cannot have the repair of the lesion. But you have the formation of granulomatosis and also fibrosis. So the healing of the scratch is not allowed. The swabs in children can increase the problems, of course. It is also necessary that the operator is an expert of the human anatomy. He must be an medical doctor in order not to induce problems. In the USA, for instance, an operator break the internal mucosa and of course open an hole in the brain, in the cavity that contains the brain. So it is a real problem, a heavy problem. The problem of the swabs is that they can be dangerous also. So it is necessary to have technicians very clever, knowing the internal anatomy. Okay.
But sometimes it's just normal people or nurses, right?
Sometimes they are not nurses, so they are students. So it is a problem. It is a problem. So,
okay.
But it is in English, so you can have the translation.
Earlier today, I put out a video with a second verification from a friend of mine, Noah, who confirmed that some of these swabs are very pokey and spiky, and when you rub it against deli meat, for instance, or in Noah's case, a sausage, it leaves these little shards impaled into the flesh. And we've covered before how this is very concerning, that this gets shoved up people's nose. And we really have to ask ourselves, what's up with the nose swabbing? Like, we've never really seen this before. Yet they're adamant about shoving these swabs up people's noses to a very uncomfortable... From a friend of mine, Noah, who confirmed that some of these swabs are very pokey and spiky, and when you rub it against deli meat, for instance, or in Noah's case, a sausage, it leaves these little shards impaled into the flesh. And we've covered before how this is very concerning, that this gets shoved up people's nose. And we really have to ask ourselves, what's up with the nose swabbing? Like, we've never really seen this before. Yet they're adamant about shoving these swabs up people's noses to a very uncomfortable and painful depth. And then they spin it around in there. And I think that this article here sheds some light about one reason why that might be. This article also goes into supposed lab work that was done on these swabs. They broke down these fibers on the end of the swabs and tested them for their compositional makeup. And the results are very startling and surprising. But we have to ask ourselves, what's up with the nose penetration and just, it's just so violent. They just shove these things up people's noses and they twist them around inside. Now, what's interesting is this pediatrician came out, and I am reading this from a translated German article, so I'm not sure if this is exactly correct, but it says here, basically most infections in humans end in the nose because the viruses and bacteria that are caught by an intact mucous membrane are then eliminated by the immune system. If the mucous membrane is damaged, and what could damage the mucous membrane, I wonder? Oh, maybe what we're about to cover in this other article, the seemingly dangerous composition of these swabs, and we've seen them in action, leaving spikes popping out after having impaled the flesh and broken off. This can't be pleasant. Could this be damaging people's mucous membrane to make them more susceptible to disease? Think about how sinister that would be. Now, I don't put anything past these people. Nothing would surprise me. But how crazy is that? Literally the exact opposite of what they're claiming to do. Actually prepping people for disease? Now, I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but how wicked would that be for them to actually be prepping people for disease when they say they're trying to test to prevent disease? So again, it says most infections end in the nose. The mucous membrane, when it's intact, apparently can eliminate most of these viruses and bacteria. However, if the mucous membrane is damaged, the likelihood of becoming infected is significantly increased. This also applies to the defense against allergic reactions. So keep that in mind when we cover this next article here. So now supposedly a researcher, a professor by the name of Antonietta Gotti, examined some of these PCR test strips using a microscope and also took it to the lab and analyzed the compositional makeup. And as it says here, the irritating result, they are made of hard materials and contain a large number of particles made of silver, aluminum, titanium, glass fibers, etc., some of which are undeclared in the package insert. It says here, if these get into the mucous membrane, they can cause wounds and inflammation, according to the scientist. The website we're reading from here, 2020news.de, which is a German extension, says 2020 News has learned from ENT doctors that they are finding increasingly hardened mucous membranes in people who are frequently tested for SARS-CoV-2. Mucous membranes that are no longer intact can no longer fulfill the task of fending off viruses, bacteria, and fungi before they reach the airways. As the pediatrician Eugen Jansen reports, the germs penetrate the respiratory tract without any immune filter. Particularly problematic in this context, the warm breath moisture under the masks is the ideal breeding ground for germs of all kinds, it says. In the laboratory, Professor Gotti used electron microscopy, ESEM and EDS, to analyze various types of swabs, which are used to collect human organic material for PCR diagnostics. So the PCR swabs. And she checked, it says here, the morphology and chemical composition. Now this is an interesting photo. Its caption is Biocoma test strips. So this picture here is apparently one brand of test strips under a microscope. It says here that this was peddled as a cotton wool stick made by Biocoma in Shenzhen, China. It was not possible for Prof. Gotti to determine whether it was made of carbon or cotton. The contamination in the product consisted of calcium carbonate, stainless steel, or silicates. Now look at this picture. This is of Manta test sticks. This looks like something we've seen before. These little spiky threads coming off the center column of these test swabs that they shove up people's nose. Then we see the fibers breaking off. Now I'm not sure what we're looking at as far as underneath this photo. So I'm not sure exactly what this photo is of. Let's see if it describes it here. It says, a brush-like test stick from Manta, China, showed a large number of broken fibers. Carbon, oxygen, silicon, zirconium, sulfur, aluminum, titanium, and sodium were found to be components of the sample. Now that's very strange. Now that sounds very concerning. It sounds like they're hardening these fibers and adding some adjutants to agitate people in their mucous membrane. Now this is a very concerning picture here. Look at this one. This is Biocoma test strips number 2. It says another swab by Biocoma appeared to be made of fiberglass, or at least to have a fiberglass coating. Now why would you have a fiberglass coating? It says appear to be made of fiberglass, or at least to have a fiberglass coating. Components were carbon, oxygen, aluminum, silicon, and titanium. It could not be ruled out that an additional coating was made of organic materials. Then we have this photo, which looks like samples that we've seen before. So this one here is the FlowQ swab, it says, made of nylon. The article reads, the tip of the applicator of another test stick, FlowQ swabs, was coated with short nylon fibers arranged vertically. FlowQ swabs do not have an internal core to contain the sample. Prof. Gotti writes, the company explains that the fiber core is made of nylon with a coating of a patented material, which in the analysis turns out to be silicate, zirconium, titanium. This coating makes the fiber harder so that it is able to tear the mucous membrane. There is a chance that the pressure applied during the smear maneuvers could break some fibers that remain in situ. I guess that might mean impaled into the flesh. I'm not sure. If so, they can cause a foreign body reaction that can damage the mucous membranes in such a way that breathing and speech are impeded. Now here's another photo, an image of the swab's neck. I mean, does this thing look like something you would use for sample collection? And why do they have to stick things up people's noses anyway? Like, this could be a very sinister operation here. And everyone just goes along with it. They don't ask any question. Oh, we're shoving things up people's nose now? All right, I'll follow my orders. That's what it seems like everybody's doing. Oh yeah, you just want me to shove that up their nose? Okay. Did anybody stop and ask why the hell are we shoving these up people's noses? Did anybody do any testing to make sure that these aren't from some sinister, evil person? No, they're too low on oxygen from these masks that they imported from our chief military rival, China. Oh yeah, let's just import a bunch of face muzzles from our #1 military rival and strap them across our face. What could go wrong? What could go wrong? According to Prof. Gotti's analysis, the small white dots on the picture of the swab neck are silver nanoparticles. Quote, silver is a material that is not declared in the manufacturer's data sheet. Prof. Gotti comes to the following conclusions. The porcupine swabs, that's a great name for them. The porcupine swabs are made from tough fibers. If they scrape on the nasal mucosa, they can damage it, causing a bleeding lesion or, in any case, trauma to the tissue. During the healing process of the mucous membrane, The broken fibers can invade the tissue without an opportunity to remove them, causing the formation of a granuloma or fibrotic tissue, as happens with any foreign body. Now, this is an interesting claim here. The medical devices examined are not completely biocompatible and therefore do not meet the requirements of ISO standard 10993 and the tests required to obtain the CE mark. If this is true, this is huge. Like, why would you just add silver and titanium and zirconium and silicate? Why would you add these things to a test swab and shove it up people's noses? This is absolutely crazy. These are the same medical professionals who will say, don't use a Q-tip in your ear. But here, let me shove this thing up your nose. We're seeing now what these things are actually made of. We're seeing what they do in experiments that try to replicate the conditions of